Well, good morning, everyone. Happy Monday. I guess it's not morning for most of you. It probably is noontime Eastern. It's still morning for me. It's 9 o'clock in the morning. So I'm just up for a couple hours and the day is beautiful. Just read on the news that at least in Arizona, the viruses have gone down, which is good news. And I'm hoping that it's good news for your state as well. I think hopefully in the next week or two, we will be turning the corner. But anyway, welcome to my Facebook page. I just want to remind you that this is my public Facebook page, not my private one. It is being streamed to my private Facebook page for those of you in Concord so that you can watch it privately. But I just want you to know that if you're on my public Facebook page, your comments are public. So that if anybody should happen to stumble on this page, those comments are there. So I just want to give you that fair warning since we're talking about a touchy subject today. And that is, I think I'm going to answer two questions. When and why you should say no more to marriage counseling. And let me just tell you that I have been a marriage counselor for 40 years. I was trained as a clinical social worker. I had a clinical license in Pennsylvania for clinical social work, had a private practice for 40 years, and did a ton of marriage counseling. So please, if you're a marriage counselor out there saying, okay, she's against my profession, I am not. I have made every mistake that I'm going to talk about today. And I'm going to tell you, so I believe in marriage counseling. Marriage counseling can do a lot of good. All right, please don't hear me say, don't ever go to a marriage counselor. Marriage counselors are terrible. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying, when should you say no, and why should you say no to more marriage counseling? Now, I'd like to just ask you guys a question. How many of you have been to marriage counselor after marriage counselor after marriage counselor after pastoral counselor after marriage counselor after marriage counselor after pastoral counselor? I mean, you've been the circuit. Some people I talk to have been to 15 different counselors trying to fix their marriage, and nothing's working. And so let me tell you why that happens and why you don't keep. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, hoping for different results. Let me tell you when you don't go anymore, when you say no more, and why. And then when you might say yes to more marriage counseling. Okay, I'll give you that little clue at the end. We'll talk more about that in the webinar, when you should say yes to more marriage counseling. We're doing a webinar workshop. We're calling it a workshop. And it is going to be a week from tomorrow. And that is, how long should I keep trying? And when will I know change is real? And those will give you some clues as to when marriage counseling might be a yes. But right now, I'm going to tell you 3 reasons why marriage counseling is a no. Get your pen out, because I'm going to give you an important sentence that I want you to have written down so that you can refer to it again, because it'll free you. It'll totally free you. So I'm going to give you a minute to get a piece of paper and a pencil while I take a swig of my coffee. I'm just going to look who's here. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, Denise and Stephanie and Crystalline. Yeah, you've been to marriage counselor. I see you've been there, done that. Okay, so let me give you a statement. I want you to write this down. Chronic patterns of abuse, adultery, or addictions, and any kind of abuse. I'm not just talking about physical abuse, emotional abuse, verbal abuse, that controlling behavior. Chronic patterns of abuse, addictions, or adultery are not marriage problems. They cause marriage problems for sure. Just like putting my hand on a hot stove causes my hand to be burnt. But my hand didn't get burnt because of the stove. The hand got burnt because I put my hand on the stove, right? So chronic adultery, chronic abuse, chronic addictions are not marriage problems. They cause marriage problems for sure. But those marriage problems that they cause cannot be fixed until the person who's in the chronic whatever, the chronic abuse, chronic adultery, chronic addictions. I'm not saying always they're that way, but it's been a pattern. Until that person does their own work to not continue those patterns. You see, we're creatures of habit. We're all in patterns of whatever patterns we're in. We brush our teeth every day, we make our bed every day, or we don't. Whatever patterns you're in, those aren't marriage issues. Those are your personal habits. Those are your personal patterns. And if you've been in a pattern of being a cheater, being a liar, being a porn addict, being a sexual addict, being a cocaine addict, yelling at your spouse, being controlling. That's an issue that you have to deal with. That's not a marriage problem. It causes marriage problems for sure because you're resisting, you're resenting, and you've got your own work to do. But trying to do marriage counseling without fixing the personal character issues first is like trying to repair a broken building, redecorate a broken building that still has termites at its foundation. A broken house that's got termites or broken foundation, and you're trying to wallpaper the walls thinking that this is going to it's going to look better. It's not. It's not going to fix the problem. All right? It might feel better temporarily, but it doesn't fix what's really caused those problems to begin with, what's caused broken trust, right? So I'm going to say it one more time in case you didn't get the whole sentence. Chronic patterns of abuse, addictions, or adultery, the three biggies, the deal breakers in marriage, are not marriage problems. They cause marriage problems, yes, and we'll talk about when counseling is appropriate for that, but they're not, you don't start with marriage counseling, okay? That's why. That's when you should say no to any more marriage counseling because you're not really dealing with the problem that you need to deal with. You're dealing with fixing something before you've addressed the problem. It's like fixing, the putting a cap on your tooth before you did the root canal. You got to do the root canal first, right? All right, so let me give you a couple other reasons when to say no. So that's why you say no. You say no to any more marriage counseling because the issues aren't being really addressed. That's when. Or why? Because that's not the problem. Let me give you three more reasons when. The first reason is when, so let's say he is going for help. Let's say he is doing Celebrate Recovery. Let's say he is going to AA. Let's say he has admitted adultery or he is getting some personal counseling. Should you do marriage counseling then? Right? Maybe. Let me give you three reasons to watch for. All right? The first is safety. Okay, implicit in a marriage counseling situation is that you're safe to tell the truth, right? You're safe to tell what's really going on. If you don't feel safe to share, he yelled at me this week, he called me these names, he doesn't give me any access to them. If you don't feel safe to disclose what's really happening at your house without fearing a terrifying car ride home or worse, marriage counseling is not a good option for you right now. It's not safe. There aren't safety measures in place. You don't feel safe emotionally. So why would you waste your money or your time going to a marriage counselor when you're not going to tell the truth? When you're not going to say, I remember doing counseling with someone whose husband had guns in the house and threatened her, and she never told me. How can you possibly do appropriate marriage counseling if the counselor doesn't know what's going on? They're not a mind reader. They're not a miracle worker. Right? So if you don't feel safe, it's your responsibility to say, no, I'm not doing that route right now. I'm not saying never, I'm not saying right now. If you don't feel safe, don't do marriage counseling. Even if you live in separate places. If you still come together and do marriage counseling and you go separate cars back separated, maybe if you can handle whatever else happens financially or the repercussions of telling the truth. So that's why he has to be at a place, the abuser or the adulterer or the addiction has to be his self of total honesty and true confession. Because unless he's willing to admit, yeah, I did do that, and yeah, I'm working on that, in the marriage counseling, you can't repair broken trust because he doesn't have anything to repair because he didn't break anything, right? He's still in a denial place. Second reason you don't do marriage counseling, at least as a first step, even though you're desperate, and this is what happens, is you are desperate to save your husband. You are desperate. You love him. You want him to change. You want him to be his better self. You're desperate for your children's sake, for your marriage to survive, and I get it. There's nothing wrong with your feelings and your love for your husband. That's great. So you finally, through threatening or consequences or pleading and begging, you drag him into the counselor's office, right? And he sits there. You don't have two clients in that office. I just want you to know marriage counseling is only effective if you have two willing clients. when you have to drag someone into treatment, you might drag them there, but you can't make them be a client. They can sit there, they can listen, but you're only a client when you say, I have a problem and I need help. And if they're not at that place yet of saying, I have a problem and I need help, guess whose problem it's going to be? You have a problem and you need help. How many of you have been there, done that? You've gone to marriage counseling and you're the willing client because you want to save your marriage. You are willing to look at yourself. You're willing to do whatever you have to do to fix this marriage. And the counseling becomes about you. Well, you must have trauma from your past. Or you can't trust men. Or you can't forgive. Or you have a hard heart. Or you just need to trust him again. And it all becomes on you because he's not really there as a client. He's not there. And if I have guys here listening to this because you've been in an abusive marriage, just reverse it, okay? It's just reverse it. My ministry is to women, so I talk to women as if they're the victim of abuse and you're the perpetrator, but that's not always the case. I understand that. I always get comments afterwards, men are yes, they are. Men are abused too. My mother was abusive. I get it. Women, females can abuse. But my ministry is to women, and so I'm talking in that language for that reason. So he sits there, and he agrees, yeah, you are hard-hearted, or yeah, you do have issues from your past. And when a counselor is looking at two people, they're looking at two sinners, two broken people, two people who have contributed to the dynamics of this relationship. That's what they're supposed to look for. So they're going to call you on things. And when they call you on things, he's going to see that as justification for why you need help and he doesn't. And the counselor also intuitively understands that your husband's not really buying into the whole counseling process yet. He's resistant, they call it. So most counselors, not everyone counselor, but most counselors will not directly address him or confront him. What their first goal will be to try to establish a relationship with him so that he wants to be a client. Now, that won't be talked about. It'll just be, hey, what'd you do this weekend? Oh, you watched the game? I love football too. Yeah, weren't those, whatever the team was, weren't they great? Yeah, and they start developing a little bit of rapport. The counselor's hoping that the potential client, your husband, will see him as safe and open up and disclose and want to be a client. But often doesn't happen. And so you're the willing client, so the counselor works with you on issues that you admit and he sees and your husband addresses. But now it lends to the belief that it's your responsibility to fix this marriage. It's your responsibility. If only you got your act together, if only you did the right thing, if only you didn't push his buttons, if only you weren't triggered, if only you were willing to have sex with him every night, then he wouldn't do that. So now you're the problem that caused him to be abusive or addicted or an adulterer. That's not true. Those problems are his problems. That doesn't mean you don't have marriage problems. But if he doesn't work on how he coped with his unhappiness inside by hurting you, if he doesn't work on that and deal with that, there is no hope to repair your marriage. Now, let me just address this myth of what's wrong with trying harder, because if you do your part, won't he see how much you love him and how much you want this marriage to work and how much you care about repairing this relationship and you are willing to do your part? In a healthy marriage that goes to counseling for those reasons, that can be great. For just a husband who's a little bit resistant because he's afraid of counseling, has never been there before, that can be great. But for someone who's been in chronic adultery, chronic abuse, chronic addictions, you've had patterns of that in your relationship, there is a lot wrong with a person who does that won't be fixed in marriage counseling. That's personal counseling issues that have to be worked on. Marriage counseling isn't about personal issues. It's about repairing the relationship, dealing with relationship issues. You can't repair a relationship if he's still hitting you below the knees when you're home, when he's still doing the same old stuff all the time or in a regular pattern. And you might have a reprieve during a season because not everyone is bad all of the time, but have they come to an understanding of what they need to change and have they done the change, or is it just the season of reprieve? We all have cycles, right, where we don't do certain things. We don't do them every day. But if you have a pattern of doing them regularly, that's not going to change. The pattern's going to come back. And unless that's addressed, first, you can't repair the relationship. The third reason, so what's wrong with trying harder? It gives you the false impression that if you try really hard, he'll try really hard. Not true. It gives you the false impression that if you try really hard, 1 Peter kind of hard, if you just suffer for Jesus and try really, really hard, somehow your husband's going to come to his senses. Doesn't always happen. And third, it gives him the false belief that it's your responsibility to fix this marriage, that it's your fault that he acts this way. And that is not true. Not true for you, not true for him. And so it's a delusion and a lie that's feeding this cycle. And there's no hope of change as long as that lie is in place. And the third reason that you don't do marriage counseling is when you don't do marriage counseling is because implicit and explicit in marriage counseling is the counselor is supposed to stay neutral. They're not supposed to take sides. All right? So you have problems, you have problems. You're a sinner, you're a sinner. You're broken, you're broken. How do we fix this? That's the mindset of a marriage counselor. They're not looking to cast blame. They shouldn't cast blame. That's not what they're about. And so when you're looking for an advocate in your marriage counselor to say, that's wrong, don't do that to her, you're not going to get it. And so then you get really confused, like, well, isn't it that bad? And he gets really confused because if the counselor doesn't say it's that bad, well, it must not be that bad. And so it just perpetuates the same old over and over again. In bully literature, the most important person in the triad, so there's 3 people in bullying. There's the bully, there's the bullied, and then there's the bystander, the class who's watching the bully the bully, right? The most important role is for the bystander to do something. When the bystander does nothing, they're neutral. They don't want to get involved. It only empowers the bully to bully more. When the bystander speaks out and says, that's not okay, we don't do this in our school, leave her alone, or leave him alone, that's not cool. When the bystander speaks up for the bullied, not the bully, for the bullied, it begins to shame the bully, especially when more bystanders. That's why the church needs to be involved in this whole abuse thing. Because when the church, men of the church stand up and say, we don't treat our wives this way. This isn't what headship means. We don't treat our wives as objects. They're not just there for our use. That begins to get an abuser's attention if they truly want to change. But marriage counseling implicitly is neutral. They don't call someone a bully. They don't say, hey, you're being emotionally abusive right now. And counselors in their training, marriage counselors, rarely get any training on these kind of dynamics in marriages with destructive behaviors. They get some domestic violence if there's been hitting, but very little about the power over dynamic that we've talked about. And so when do you do marriage counseling? When you see he's owned his problem of abuse or addictions or adultery. He's doing his work to get himself healthy. He sees this is my problem that has caused our problems. Now we have broken trust. Now you don't trust me. You don't want to be around me. You don't want to sleep with me because of what I've done to you. All right? And so now as I work on me, can we fix we? Maybe, maybe not. But if he never works on me, let me share with you another important truth. You cannot fix we. If the problems that broke we to begin with in him are never addressed, and he never works on them, and he never confesses them and repents of them and deals with them, there is no fixing we, not in a healthy way. Okay, so 3 reasons why you should say no more to marriage counseling. One is marriage counseling isn't the solution when you have individual issues. Marriage counseling might be a solution to repair the relationship after the individual issues are addressed, but not first. It's the last step of the treatment process. 3 reasons when you say no: I don't feel safe. He's not really interested in going. He doesn't identify himself as a client. And third, Marriage counseling is values neutral. You don't cast blame. Both people have issues to work on, and that's true. You have your own work to do too. But if you're looking for an advocate, you're looking for someone to rescue you, you're looking for someone to be on your side in marriage counseling, not going to happen. So I'm open to answering some questions on this topic. And if you signed up for our workshop webinar, you will get a video on this as well that gives a little bit more detail, a little bit more scripture and things like that. So if you want to sign up for the webinar, we are going to have it next Tuesday, the 14th at noon and at 7:30 Eastern Time. It'll be about an hour long, maybe a little bit. The webinar itself, the content of the webinar will be an hour long. And it is, if you find these Facebook Lives valuable in terms of information, imagine a whole hour of me teaching you valuable content. I want you to know up front, I am not pitching anything. I will invite you to work with me at the end in Conquer. If you want to be a part of Conquer, Conquer's our membership for women in destructive marriages, who is closed all year long except for twice a year, and it will open it Tuesday for those of you who might want to transition into Conquer. But that's it. But I am going to give you an hour full of very important information to help you stay sane and get strong even in a destructive marriage, so that you don't lose your way in your growth, in your parenting, and with the Lord, even if your marriage fails. I hope your marriage doesn't fail. I'm all for helping a marriage repair, but I want to be truthful with you. I don't want to lie to you. Have you ever hired a contractor or something and there was something wrong with your home or something wrong with your car, and they said, oh, we'll just do this, and that really wasn't it, because that wasn't fixing the problem. The problem was deeper. And so I just want to be honest with you. When you have chronic issues of chronic adultery, chronic addictions, chronic abuse in a relationship, it breaks the relationship for sure, but you can't repair the relationship until what broke the relationship is addressed and fixed first. Plus, if you've been dancing with destructive part for any number of years, you have to own your part. And so you've got your own work to do too. And so that's what we do in Conquer, helping you to do your own work. But you are going to get the whole shebang, the whole roadmap. If you want to do it your own self, you'll have every step you need to do it. So I highly encourage you to sign up for our workshop next week. And it's www.leslievernick.com/join webinar. All right. It's a workshop, but we're calling it a webinar workshop because it's on the webinar, but we're calling it a workshop because you're going to get an extensive handout. So you won't be writing furiously. I'm going to give you some very important information that I promise you will really help you get clear in your head about what's going on and what you need to do to get healthy and strong. All right? Okay, let me answer some questions. If you know somebody who might benefit from this workshop, I would really invite you to also share that link for them to sign up to. I feel very isolated, even though I'm in a full house. I miss my community of sisters. How can I find a new community during this time? It is rough. And there are, different communities that are springing up online. Even we have a neighborhood community that's together, so I'm sure there's some available to you. But one very special community, I mentioned it just before, is Conquer. Conquer's been a community. Excuse me. I've been sick this week with a little bit of stomach issues, but I have these allergies, and all this pollen is out, and I cleaned my deck yesterday, and so I've been dry mouth, dry throat. Anyway, Conquer is a community that we've had in establishment for about 6 years now, 5 years maybe, and it's only for Christian women who are in destructive marriages or getting out of destructive marriages, or who want to learn while they're in a destructive marriage how to stay well, or if they can stay well in that marriage. And so it's a very robust community. It's a loving community. It's a community that reaches worldwide. We have women in England and other places, and they get together. So we try to network within our local communities, and we have a huge online presence. So if that's of interest to you, that might be something that you want to be a part of. It's not open yet, but it'll be open next Tuesday when we do our webinar. All right, let's see. My pastor kept telling me that we just need to go to a counselor to learn to work together, but I always coming out looking like the bad guy when I want to stop. You will. That's why don't even start. Don't even start. I think what you can say something like, I've done a lot of reading on this, and I don't think my husband's chronic adultery is our problem. It's caused problems between us for sure. Or my husband's chronic addiction, or my husband's porn addiction, or my husband's whatever it is, chronic deceit with me. I don't think it's a marriage issue. I think it's a personal character issue that he needs to deal with. And if he's willing to deal with it and he goes for help and really addresses that, I'm open to marriage counseling down the line. So you don't seem like a hard-hearted, unwilling, rebellious wife. I'm open to marriage counseling down the line, but all my reading tells me that this isn't the first good step. All right? It's like right now in COVID-19, there's triage in the hospital, right? And if you have, a broken finger, you're probably not going to go to the ER right now, right? And even if you were to go to the ER, let's take COVID-19 out of it, and you were to go to the ER, your broken finger is not as important to treat as someone who's coming in with a heart attack. But let's say you got in a car accident and you had a broken leg and you were having a heart attack at the same time. Which would they treat first? They would treat your heart attack first, right? Because if they fix your leg but they don't fix your heart attack, you could have a fine leg but a dead body. And so there's triage in treatment, medical treatment. We do the heart, we do the most lethal thing first. All right, the same thing is true in counseling. So if you're doing marriage counseling and you've got someone who's actively an addict and you don't deal with the addiction first, marriage counseling is a waste of time. Because first of all, an addict's not honest. Second of all, they're not sober. And third of all, they can't possibly work on a relationship when their best relationship is with their addiction. They have to work on that first. So triaging treatment is smart. And so for you to stand up for yourself and just say, Pastor, I know you mean well, and I believe your heart, but it's not that I'm against marriage counseling. I just don't think that's the first treatment we need. And just stand up for yourself with the truth and do it in a full, kind way, but stand up for yourself. Okay, lots of questions. And we're going to be addressing the specifics of this in the webinar. Okay, so I'm giving you some basics if you can't attend the webinar or whatever, but I'll give you some real specifics in the webinar. I'm struggling with feeling like I need to do everything right now, but when I try to have people help me, I'm guilty that I'm not strong enough to keep things together. How can I let go of this guilt? Your guilt is coming from a belief, all right? So whenever you have a feeling that you don't want to have anymore, shame, guilt are usually the two, it's important to ask yourself, what beliefs do I have that fuel this? So there seems to be a belief in you that you have to do everything in order for you to feel okay about yourself. That if you don't do everything, then you don't deserve to feel okay about yourself. In fact, if you don't do everything, you're bad. And there seems to be a belief in there that you need to address and look at. We do a lot of this work in Conquer. In our Conquer times together, I do a little bit of teaching on something like beliefs, and then we do some talking about that to help you really put into practice, like what belief am I hanging on to? That's totally not true. And for those of you who know me, you know I shared this crazy story. A couple months ago, I was in San Diego, and I got out of my Uber. We rented a Airbnb, and I was with a group of people. We were in a mastermind, and I was waiting for the rest of them, but I had to go to the bathroom, so I thought, well, I'll just get in there early. Not early, but the time I was supposed to. I was there right at 4 o'clock. We were allowed to go in at 4 o'clock, but I couldn't get in the gate. The gate was locked. It had a big, key lock in there, and it had no code, and I didn't know how to get in. So I texted the people who rented it, and they said there's a code on the door. So I went over to the door by the gate, and the code didn't work. And I texted them back. I said, the code's not working. I'm about ready to pee my pants. And I go back toward the gate with the lock, and another person from the mastermind comes out of her Uber, and she goes to the gate with the lock, and there's this big gate. It's like 6 feet tall, the gate, right? And it's got a big, not a padlock, but a big key lock on it. And you know what she does? She walks right up to the gate, and she goes, and she pushes it open. It was not locked at all, but I had this belief it was locked. And because I believed it was locked, I never even pushed to see if that were true. So you have some beliefs that are causing you to feel like you're violating your moral code, because guilt is an emotion that we should have when we violate God's moral code. But when you have false guilt, it's because you're violating someone else's moral code. Maybe your moral code, like I have to be perfect in order to be acceptable, or I have to do everything for everybody in order for me to feel good about myself. Whatever beliefs you're having, you've never pushed against that. And when you push against it and you don't do it because you're exhausted, then the guilt comes like, oh, I should. So go look at your shoulds. I should what? I should what? I shouldn't what? That usually is a guilt producer. And find out what beliefs you're having that you need to address. Can avoidance and stonewalling be called abuse? We can call anything we want it to call it if you want to. You see this in politics all the time. We can twist something and convolute something. So our commitment, my commitment to you, and our commitment in Christians is to walk in the truth. And so none of us has the whole truth. None of us sees everything clearly. See through a glass dimly. So I think that stonewalling and avoidance they come out of fear of conflict, fear of not knowing what to say, fear of not knowing how to handle something, and not know what to say. And so the consequences may feel abusive to you. They may not be intentionally abusive, just like if I'm, driving scared and I run someone over, I'm not intending to harm them, but I did because I was scared. Where it gets more abusive is when it's a chronic pattern and you've shared with your husband this chronic pattern of avoiding things. Your fear is harming me because it's harming us. We can't talk about anything. We can't resolve anything. And when he cares more about keeping himself comfortable and safe versus being the hero and saying, okay, well, I hate conflict and I don't know what to say and I'm scared to do it, but let's talk about it, and cares about your needs, that's the issue. So if he could own, so I'm not sure it would be helpful for you to say, I think you're abusing me, but I think it would be helpful to say, you're hurting me and you're harming our relationship because you can't seem to handle conflict or discussion even about something. Are you willing to get help to learn how to do that? Because I don't know how we go forward from here. So I think we can learn to confront people in ways that maybe they are willing to hear better. So let me just give you an analogy. And we talk a lot about this in Conquer. I teach women how to confront their husbands or even confront their pastors on stuff. But if you were at the doctor because you had stress eaten over this COVID-19, how many of you would raise your hand and say, that's me? Let's say you went to the doctor next year after you stress ate yourself 25 pounds heavier, and you were still now in the pattern of stress eating because you're used to eating your M&Ms every night or whatever you did to comfort yourself, ice cream. And the doctor comes in there and says, well, look at you, fatty. What are you going to do about that? How likely are you to be motivated to change? Probably not. You would be defensive, you would be ashamed, you would be probably telling yourself, I'm not ever coming back to this doctor again, right? Because they're calling you a name, they're being insensitive, they're shaming you. So I think in the same way, if you're wanting to get a positive result with someone and have a hard conversation with them, it's important for you to watch your words and speak the truth in love. So what would happen if the doctor came in and said, what's going on? I see that, you've maintained your weight for all these years, and this year you've put on 25 pounds, and I'm concerned for you. Let's talk about that. You probably would start crying and probably want to, I hate this. I hate that I'm like this, and I don't know how to stop. I'm caught. I'm caught in a trespass, caught in a sin, Galatians 1 says, 6:1. So it says, if any of you being caught in a trespass, you who are spiritual, restore such a one in a spirit of gentleness. And so I do think it's important that you do your own work, because there can be so much bitterness and resentment at his passivity and so much anger that he won't step up as a man, that we can start spewing some of our own abusive words ourselves in the more aggressive kind of way. They're passive or aggressive when we get so frustrated like that. So part of my goal with women who are being abused in some way or being mistreated in some way in their marriage is, how do you learn to not just suck at Jesus? That's absolutely what God doesn't call you to do. But how do you learn to speak the truth in love? How do you learn to confront sin? Galatians 6:1. How do you learn to speak up to someone who's caught in a trespass? Your husband's caught in this passive comfort mindset. Like, don't bother me. I don't want to be upset by anything. I don't know how to deal with my upset feelings, right? And you can have pity on that. But how do you speak to him in a way that might invite him to look at himself more? You can't make it happen. Jesus did it with people, and some looked and some didn't, right? Like Nicodemus. Nicodemus and him had a conversation, and Nicodemus was able to look at himself. And the Samaritan woman was able to look at herself, right? Then he had conversations with Judas and the Pharisees, and they weren't willing to look at themselves. They weren't willing to. So just because you say it right doesn't mean he's going to get it. But I guarantee you, if you say it wrong, he's probably not going to get it, all right? So your job is just to speak the truth in love and learn how to do that and deal with your own resentment that's coming up because of that behavior. All right. What if your husband agrees to do personal counseling but does not see his abuse? My husband went with the pastor because he wanted to improve our marriage, but he doesn't know if it's abusive. So this is where it gets dicey. If you have to have him use that word in order for you to feel okay, you may not get anywhere. Because his idea of abuse and your idea of abuse might be very different. Just like if he was looking at other women and you called that adultery, some people would, Jesus did, but he might not because he didn't actually have sex with that woman, right? So if you need to use a certain word and he needs to use that same word in order for you to feel okay, you're kind of stuck. And that's why I teach women or men to use the behaviors. Well, I don't know whether you can label this behavior abusive, but when you scream 2 inches from my face and call me 4-letter words, I feel that's abusive, right? Or what you may not see it as abusive that you don't give me any access to our joint marital assets, but I see it as abusive because I don't have equal power to make decisions in about our money. I don't have any ability to make sure our finances are safe or to double check what's happening. And that feels like you're locking me out, and it feels abusive to me that you're the king and I'm the slave, and you're the dictator and I'm the child. I don't like that, right? So I think describing the behavior and saying, are you willing to work on that behavior? Whether or not you see it as abusive, I feel it that way. Are you willing to work on that? Are you willing to change that? Here's a really important tip, ladies. When your husband says, well, I'll go to counseling, but I don't see that I have a problem, guess what he's going to do in counseling? He's going to talk about you. You have the problem. My wife is so unforgiving. I don't know how to deal with it. She is so angry at everything. I think she has issues from her past. I don't know how to set boundaries with my wife. That's what he's going to talk about in counseling. I'm just telling you. All right. So if he doesn't own his problem and he's going to counseling for a problem he needs to work on, and it's not how I live with this awful woman, but I have a problem with whatever the issues are that you think are hurting the marriage, then don't place hope in the counselor being able to read his mind or know the secret behind all that. People are good liars. People are really good liars. And counselors can't read clients' minds. So if the client comes in and says, my problem is my wife won't forgive me. My problem is my wife is mean and unforgiving. My problem is, and so I don't know what to do. She's going to treat him, or he's going to treat him, as if he needs to learn to have better boundaries and stand up for himself, right? Because the counselor doesn't know he's not telling the truth. All right. What's the term for when he punches a wall or drives dangerously? I would use these terms. He's reckless when he drives, and he scares me. He's scary when he punches a wall, because how would I know that it wouldn't be me someday or one of the kids? I'm not willing to live this way. I want you to write down another phrase. This is really, really important, ladies, and I just can't emphasize this enough. Or gentlemen. When you give your entire well-being into the hands of another person, there's something wrong with you. That's your work to do. So either you're an infant or you're a prisoner. Those are the only ways. But even when you're a prisoner, they might be able to control your food intake. They might be able to control your body in terms of when it can go to the bathroom or when it can sleep even, or all those. But they can't control what's in your mind. That's you. That's your job. So when you need something from someone in order to be okay, I need your love. I need your approval. I need you to change. I need you to do this for me. Then you have put your well-being in the hands of an unreliable person, especially if they're not going to do it. And that's a scary thing to do. And so part of your work here is to pull that power back and say, what do I need? So if he drives recklessly, I'm not going to drive with you because I'm responsible to steward my well-being. If you don't feel it's abusive to punch holes in the walls, and that's how you want to live, with holes all over the walls because your rage is strong and you want to be able to punch holes whenever you want, all right, but I'm not willing to live that way, and I don't think the children should be in that kind of environment. It's very stressful. So I don't think we have to always say, you're abusive and you have to admit it, but you're doing things that make me feel uncomfortable, unsafe, and I'm not willing to live like this forever. I'm only willing one-time incident, and it's over, it never happens again. Okay, I can forget that. But a repeated pattern of driving recklessly, punching holes in walls, you're not learning from your mistakes, you're not changing, why would I put myself in that situation? You see, we keep asking them to change so we feel better, but they don't want to change. They feel justified. And so you're not going to convince someone who feels justified. It's my house, I can put holes in the walls if I want to. It's my car, I could drive recklessly when I want to. He ticked me off. You're not going to change their mind. So you're responsible for you. And if you feel unsafe with someone, why would you get in the car with them, even if they're your husband? So what I would say is, hey, if you feel it's okay to drive recklessly when you're mad, I guess I'm going to have to drive separately. Or if you want to go together, I'm going to drive, because then I know how I drive and I feel safe with me. Whoa, that's what you think? Yep, that's what I think. And here's where you need to get strong enough to be assertive, to say, if you want to live like that, then that's your choice, but I'm not willing to live like that. You think it's okay to watch porn 4 hours a day. I can't change your mind, but I don't want to be married to someone who wants to do that. That's totally unappealing to me. And you don't have to necessarily use the words abuse. You need to just describe the behavior. That behavior is so unappealing, unsafe, disgusting to me. I can't do it. If someone is pooping in their pants all day, I don't want to live with a man who's doing that. If he wants to do it, I can't stop him, right? So I think you have to steward your well-being. All right, let's see. I have stopped sleeping with my husband because of the chronic verbal emotional abuse over many years. He is having a very hard time with this, but refuses to own his part. I'm not sure what else I can say to him other than I don't want to feel used. Any other practical advice on what to say? So I would start in teaspoons. So how I say this is sometimes we give people like a fire hose of truth, and they can't handle it. And even if you put a big fire hose to your mouth, most of it would squirt out, most of it wouldn't get in, right? So I would start with teaspoons of truth. And if you can mix a little sugar in it, that can help. Pleasant words are sweet like a honeycomb, healing to the bones. So I think that if you can mix, and you have to be genuine about this, you have to do this in integrity. So here would be a little sweetness with truth. I know it's miserable for you to be in separate bedrooms. So that's a little sweetness of empathy and compassion, right? It's not saying, oh, I love you so much. Maybe you can't go there, but I know it's hard for you. that we sleep in separate bedrooms? Do you want to talk about it? That's the first teaspoon of truth. So you're not going in, let's talk about this. He's like getting defensive and argumentative. Do you want to talk about it? Okay. And if he says, yeah, I do, then say, okay, I don't feel like we have a good relationship. So you're going to use words like I instead of you. I don't feel safe with you. I feel like I don't matter to you. That when you get mad and you call me those ugly names and then you want to kiss me, it just totally turns me off. I can't be sexy with you. I can't feel interested in you when I think you hate me most of the time, except for when you want sex. That just doesn't work for me. So now you're not saying you're abusive, you're a horrible person, I hate you. You're just saying, let's talk about it. So then you're going to end with, so one more teaspoon if you said yeah, and then you're going to say, does that matter to you? Does how I feel matter to you? That's $1 million question that you're going to give him a teaspoon of truth and then ask a question, which gives him a chance to swallow the truth and let it digest. Does it matter to me? I guess not. Or, well, of course it matters to me. So if it matters to you how I feel, then why do you keep calling me all those ugly names? Second teaspoon of truth. Stop, all right? Men don't process verbally as fast as we do, and they are more defensive oftentimes and all of that. So take 1 teaspoon and see if he swallows it. If he doesn't swallow it and he's not willing to digest it, don't keep doing it. Don't waste your precious time force feeding someone who doesn't want to eat, who doesn't want to know, right? It's not going to help him and it's not going to help you, right? Let's see. Do I recommend separate bedrooms if you choose not to leave? I think that's up to you, what works and what feels safe and what's not safe. I don't know. I mean, sometimes a sexual relationship can be the best part of a relationship. I'm not saying that you shouldn't have sex with someone who you're married to or care about. Unless you're being treated in such disrespectful, abusive ways that you're not in integrity with yourself. So one of our components of CORE, which we teach in Conquer, CORE, the R step, I will be responsible for myself and respectful to others without dishonoring myself. And when I have to do things that dishonor myself in order to please you, that I'm living out of integrity, right? If I have to lie in order to please you, if I have to pretend in order to please you, if I have to lie and pretend in bed in order to please you, I'm living out of integrity. And so that doesn't mean I have to feel like I'm always turned on every time I have sex. I really want to please you and love you and care about you, and sex is one way I can do that. I think that happens in marriage a lot. You don't always feel the same level of sexual appetites. But if I'm resentful and seething and nauseous while we're having sex, then I'm not living in integrity and I'm dishonoring myself. So what do I need to do to feel differently? I might need to have a conversation with you about that and see if that matters to you. And if it doesn't matter to you, I mean, if we just think about a very physical thing, let's say that your husband was a worker, a physical worker, and because he worked physically in his job, he had, dirt and body odor when he came home from work, and he wanted to be physical. And you said, oh, you need to take a shower first. And he says, no, you should want to have it with me just like now. Just like, this is who I am. This is how and you're like, but I can't do it. I'm not, it's not appealing. It's like eating something that has dirt all over it. I don't want to do that, right? If how you feel does not matter to him, then you're just an object to use, right? For what he wants. So this sharing how you feel, not accusing and attacking him, but sharing how you feel, and then asking, does that matter to you, helps you to see any kind of relationship. And he may twist it. There's lots of twisty turns and, well, does it matter to you that I need sex? Well, yeah, that's why we're trying to have this conversation. But I can't have sex the way that you want it. So does that matter to you? Right? And 1 teaspoon, see if it goes down and see what happens. All right, let's see. gotta see what time it is. Okay. I have a phone call at 10:15, so I just want to be careful here. I have a husband who owns his part but feels no godly remorse. I would ask you, how do you know that? So if he says, yeah, I'm a cocaine addict, I'm fine with that. All right. Or I watch porn, and so that's what you mean? So there's no, like, this was wrong, I do it, or I'm sorry I hurt you, kind of, but this is who I am, and tough beans. If you don't like it, go. If that's what you're talking about, I get that. But I think you need to be careful. So I think we don't know the fruits of repentance. We don't know what's in someone's heart, but we do know the fruits of repentance. So what do you see on the outside that lets you know that there's no godly remorse? Is there truly no hope left? The workshop on the 14th will give you more clarity about that. So Henry Cloud has written a good book called Necessary Endings, and it's really a business book on when should you let people who you work for, like, if you're in ministry, like, when do you end Sunday school, or when do you end Wednesday night prayer meeting, or if you're working with someone, when do you end, things that just aren't working anymore, things that are old, or things that are dying, or relationships that need to go with coworkers. And he has one chapter on hope. Like when you have a coworker, or you're a boss in a company, and your employee is making mistake after mistake after mistake. Do you keep giving them a second chance, or do you let them go? Cut the cord. And he talks about toxic employees. So it might be a really helpful book for you to read in that. But I think when we hope that something's going to happen, and it doesn't happen, we can get discouraged, like Elijah did when he hoped that Ahab and Jezebel would repent after the big miracle on Mount Carmel, right? And it didn't happen. Or when John the Baptist probably hoped that he would get out of jail and he got beheaded instead, right? Or when we hope that God's going to fix our marriage and he doesn't. So how long do we hope? And so I think we have to make sure that we put our hope in the right thing. I think what you can hope in is that, just like now, I don't know how long this coronavirus is going to last. I don't know who I know is going to be impacted or affected. I don't know any of that. So I'm not putting my hope in, God's going to protect my entire family, or God's going to, keep, from me, or, I can't put my hope in that. What I put my hope in is that God has a plan. God is a good God. He loves me. He loves my family. He loves all of us. And there is a purpose in here that I can't see. So I'm putting my hope in God's character, not in what I think God should do. Here's the thing that we do in hoping. We believe, since God hates divorce, or we tell ourselves that God hates all divorce, which, by the way, is not true. He hates some divorce, but he doesn't hate all divorce. But since God wants us to stay married, it is God's will that we stay married, I'm going to put my hope on that's what God's going to do. But God never violates someone's personal freedom to say no. Even it is God's will that none should perish, but all should come to eternal life. We know that. But does everyone come to eternal life? No. Jesus was on the cross. Today you shall be with me in paradise. This guy, not so. Why? Because he didn't want to. He didn't want to repent. He didn't want to bow his knee. And Jesus didn't make him. And so we have a free choice. And so I think you need to look at the evidence as just like if I have cancer and the evidence is I'm dying, I'm not going to hope that God's going to work a miracle. He could, but what I'm going to hope in is God's goodness, and he will cause all things to work together good, but I will get my affairs in order, right? I will face reality. And I think that's what we need to do. All right. What if I believe, like you did with the gate, that my marriage is over and it's not? He is such a good talker, actor, for bits of time, and then boom. But he has me thinking, the boom comes from me, not being nice. When will I have clarity? It makes me want to say, that's it. And I think I am. I do not like myself when I'm around him. So I think here's where it's a good place for me to say, your own work to do. So I think one of the things that happens in my ministry to all of you is that it gets very clearer and clearer and clearer that you're in an abusive, destructive relationship. And that's fine. Then what happens is he becomes the bad guy and you become the good guy, right? Or you start to feel like he's calling you the bad guy and he's the good guy because now you won't forgive him. And so it becomes this black, white, good, bad dynamic. And what I say to you over and over again, especially my little tribe and conquer, is, hey, you have your own work to do. So this question just says, you've got your own work to do. There's some confusion in your head. Maybe you're not nice. And so because we're all human, and so when you try to show sorry, try to show remorse, or try to change. So if I'm trying to change and I'm saying, okay, I'm going to eat right. I've been gaining too much weight over this COVID-19 thing, and I'm going to really work on my eating. And my husband brings home pizzas and ice cream or orders Uber Eats, and then it's like temptation is right in front of my nose. It's really hard for me not. It's not like he's saying you have to eat it, but it's like, I want to eat it and I want to eat it too. So here we are. And I'm not saying that happens, but all I'm saying is that when someone has a goal to try to change and we're somewhat sabotaging that goal by our behavior, it's harder for them to change. It's harder for them to change. And that's why it's so important. If you want to change, if you want to be the author of your own story instead of just the victim of it, if you want to be the hero of your own story instead of just the victim of it. And I don't mean that Jesus isn't the ultimate hero. What I'm saying is that when we finish this season of life, whether it's this season of COVID-19 or this season of your marriage, you're going to finish it, whether by death or divorce, it's going to be finished, right? What's your part of the story? What's your part of the story? What do you want said about the kind of person you were during this time? Can't control the environment. Maybe your neighbors are all stingy. Maybe your husband's an awful person. But what's your part? And that's the work you have to do, because it's hard to do your part well when you're in a group of people who are not doing their part well. It's much easier to default. That's why God says, keep good company, because bad company corrupts good morals, right? And so when you're in an environment where there's argument and testiness and abusive speech and ugliness and bitterness and anger, and it just rubs off on you. And so I would encourage you. I don't know. It's vague of a situation but I think if you're having some doubts, what if I'm believing something wrong, or what if this is part of my dynamic too? I think it would be perfectly fine for you to say to your husband, you know what? I've come to understand it might not be all you. I don't know if it is all you. I know I don't like myself when I'm with you, and I can't live with you right now. I don't know if our marriage is over. All I know is I need to work on me right now, and I hope you work on you. And then we'll see about us, right? It's like if you both had an illness. You know, you got to get better, and he's got to get better to continue to work on us. And if not, I mean, you can live together. Anybody can live together. Roommates can live together. You can live together as a married couple, right? But you don't have a healthy relationship. And I think this is one of the mistakes that the church makes. It's like, as long as you live together, okay, we're good. Is that what honors God the most? That you just live together. You hate each other, you're resentful, you don't talk to each other, but you're living together, you're keeping your vows. Is that honoring to God? I just have to think God laughs at that. Is that really honoring me? Stayed no matter what. I hate his guts, but I stayed no matter what. Is that how you want to write your story? See, so do your own work, friend. You've got your own work. Even if you've been the passive one, even if you've been the accommodating one, even if you've been the overfunctioning one, you've got work to do, girlfriend. You've got boundaries to make. You've got assertive skills to learn. You've got to know that you got to find and a voice that you got to use. And maybe you've never used it, or maybe he's never used it. But you can't do his work. All you can do is your work. But what kind of story do you want your character to tell at the end of the story? Many of you know I've just finished reading the book, The Choice. Really good book about a woman in a concentration camp. And this story metaphor is really powerful because, she talks about how, she had choices, the choices about how she was going to be in Auschwitz. She got a hunk of bread for doing something for one of the guards. She was ballerina and she danced, and he gave her a little hunk of bread, a bigger hunk of bread than she would normally get. And she had a choice. Here's my hunk of bread. Am I going to share it with my sister? Am I going to share it with the girls in my bunk in the concentration camp? Or am I going to eat it all myself because I'm starving? That's my choice. I want to share it. That's who I am. So even in those teeny weeny little choices, I don't have a choice not to dance. I don't have a choice to get out of this concentration, but I do have a choice about whether I'm going to be selfish in this moment or selfless. Am I going to be mean or kind? Am I going to tell the truth or am I going to pretend? Who am I going to be now, right now, in this COVID-19 crisis, in my house? What kind of story are my children going to read about who I was in this moment? That's totally up to you. And if you need more help with that, I highly encourage you to consider joining our Conquer group next week, because we dive deep into this piece. It's not all about blaming and shaming our husbands. It's about who do we need to be in the midst of this, even if we need to be divorced. How do we do that story? Says something about who we are. All right. My husband is willing to go to counseling or work individual on our relationship on his own and ask for suggestions on who to turn to. Who would you recommend? Well, so here's what I would say. There's not a lot of people trained in this area. So I would make sure that someone was very trained on dealing with his issues, whether they are addictions, adultery, or abuse. So you can ask the counselor questions. You can interview the counselor to see what kind of training they have, what kind of philosophies they have. Don't just assume because they have a degree or a license that they're competent to counsel. They may not be. But second of all, what you say to the counselor as to what your problem is shapes the treatment plan, right? And so when you say, if my husband is willing to go to counseling or work individually on our relationship on his own, so that's very different. If he's willing to go to counseling, so the way you wrote this, if my husband is willing to go to counseling or work individually on our relationship. So let's say he goes to the counselor and says, my wife wants me to come here individually because our marriage is a mess. Well, what's wrong with your marriage? Well, she won't sleep with me. She doesn't trust me. Well, why is that? Well, I cheated on her, but she doesn't forgive me, or, I have a problem with alcohol. And, is he going to be honest with that part? Is he going to be truthful? Or is he just saying, she's got a background where her father, was very harsh with her, and she just doesn't seem to trust people very easily. So is he going to spin it where the counselor doesn't really know why their relationship problem is broken? And depending on how good the counselor is at catching him in inconsistencies and catching him, but then the counselor doesn't want to challenge because she has to build this relationship of trust, and so she's not going to come in there with gangbuster trusting issues like, hey, you said this but you meant this, or you didn't say this, but or can I call your wife and check what you're saying? So I would say to your husband, look, if you really mean that you're going to get help for you, I would ask that you would sign a release, that the counselor can talk to me and get my perspective on our relationship issues as well. And that I could share with the counselor my perspective, and that they could share with me the progress that you're making. Are you willing to do that? Because the counselor can't talk to you without him signing a release. So his willingness to sign a release says something about his openness. His willingness to let the counselor hear from you about your perspective says something. That's not doing marriage counseling. It's just giving the counselor information from your side of the street about what's going on. If he won't sign any of that, I would say it's smoke and mirrors. All right. Let's see. My daughter and 3 littles live with a very broken man. She babies him. He's reckless with finances, counts on her to run the home. She's working 2 jobs and supporting him in his business. He's in landscaping 7 days a week, gives the kids and her no support. She refuses to admit any problems. I find it hard to talk to her as she is always, the rest of it's missing. So here's what you can do. You can pray. There's nothing else you can do. All right. She's not ready to see it. And she's getting something out of being the overfunctioner, right? You see, when you're overfunctioning, you get someone to need you. And when you get someone to need you, that feels good to someone who doesn't feel like they would be with you if they didn't need you. And so this is part of our work to do as sometimes women, is that we don't have enough self-esteem and enough self-respect to say, this is who I am, and I don't have to work my fingers to the bone to get you to love me. I don't need to get you to need me to love me. You love me for loving me. It's a gift that you give me and I give you. And if you don't need me, like when I've always talked to you about parenting, I said, your job as a mom to work yourself out of a job. My kids don't need me. They don't need me. They shouldn't. They're adults. They don't need me to be a mom anymore. They're on their own. But they love me and we have a relationship. That's what you want, right? And so your daughter, for some reason, needs your husband to need her. And she's not willing to look at that yet either. So she's fostering this. He's got his own issues of being irresponsible, being lazy, but her babying him, her overfunctioning, her compensating for his weaknesses is part of that codependence, the addict and the codependent, the co-addict, right? And so her issues, and that's why I say do your own work, friend. It's not about ending a destructive marriage and finding the right man. It's about getting healthy so you don't do this dance again and again and again. So right now, your job is to pray for her. How can I get the point across when he immediately throws back what I do at me? He says he acknowledges what he's done, but he doesn't recognize the severity of what he's done. You can't make someone see something they don't want to see. So the only thing I could suggest is that you model it. So when he says, well, you've done the same thing too, you could say, all right, well, let's talk about me for now. So what is it that bothers you? Okay, I see that. Or, oh, I don't agree with that. What do you need me to do to change in order for you to feel safer? Or what do you need me to do in order for you to feel like I care? Okay, I hear that. I'm willing to do, and do it if you're willing to do it. All right, don't say you're willing to do it, but if you're willing to do it, do it. And that might model for him what it looks like to go a little deeper and take some responsibility for it. And then the other thing you could do is you could say, so I know that our pattern is when I bring something up, you always say I do it too, or I do something bad too. And that's probably, I've got my own stuff. So I'm not saying here that I'm white, you're black, or I'm the good guy and you're the bad guy. But there is something I need to talk to you about you, and I wanted to stay on that subject. 1 teaspoon. Are you willing? So now you haven't gone there yet, but you've made him curious. But are you willing? Because he may say no, and that tells you something. I don't want to hear anything bad about myself. I can't handle it. I can't handle it, right? And those are his issues, and he can't handle it. And so he has the freedom to say no. You can't make someone see. You can't make someone hear. Jesus says they're blind and deaf. They won't see or hear, and you can't make someone. You can invite them. Are you willing? Are you willing? Right? I mean, think of it. Let's say your best friend said to you, and I don't know if this is true, but let's say your best friend or even your neighbor came over. Well, let's say your best friend or your husband. Hey, I've noticed that you've been gaining weight. Are you willing to get on the scale and look and see how much you really gained? No, I'm not. I don't want to know. I don't want to face it, right? I mean, I think we can relate to that with some empathy instead of being so like, how can he be like that? We can understand a little bit. Like, no, I don't want to know right now. I don't want to look in the mirror. I don't want to get on the scale. I just want to do what I'm doing, right? Because it feels better. And so be careful that we're not putting some burden on someone that we don't want to bear ourselves. We understand that doesn't mean you can live with someone who's not willing to look. So this is why it has to be deal breakers that we're talking about. All right. Let's see. I got to check my watch. All right. My husband is a master at word salad, blame shifting and justifying his behavior. All discussions go up to the point that I've been turned back on me. So I'm reluctant to have a conversation about us because it ends up being a twisted mess with me trying to defend myself. What's a respectful exit from the conversation when I see he isn't owning his part? First of all, you're having a belief that you can have a conversation with this man. You cannot. He doesn't want to have a conversation. That's why he does what he does. All right? So you have to practice something in Conquer we call JADE. All right? JADE. You have to stop justifying. You have to stop arguing. You have to stop defending, and you have to stop explaining. Now, all of those things, justifying, arguing, defending, and explaining, are typically fine in a normal conversation. But with this kind of person, it will just end up in more crazy talk, crazy making circular dance. And it'll make you so frustrated that you will blurt out and start acting a little crazy or saying really mean things, and then he will then flip it on you. So you say, I'm abusive? Look at yourself. It'll just end poorly. So you have to say, no more. And the statement you have to say is, I accept that we're never going to agree on this. I accept that you think the way that you think, and I'm never going to change your mind. So you're just going to let it go by not agreeing with him, but accepting that he sees things black and you see things white. He thinks you're crazy. I accept that you think I'm crazy. I accept that you think that I'm a Jezebel spirit, right? And it's hard for us to accept that because we don't like it. But if the doctor told you you had breast cancer, would you accept it and not like it? I accept that you told me this. Now that I know this, what do I need to do? Now that I know that you see me as a Jezebel spirit, now that I accept this, it helps you with your next step. What does this mean for you? What does this mean for your marriage? Right? By not accepting it and resisting it and keep fighting against it. No, you can't think that about me. They thought Jesus was demon possessed. He accepted that. I accept that you think that about me. I'm moving on, right? You have to accept that not everybody's going to think fondly of you or agree with you, and it might be people in your own household. And you have to be okay with that. Your well-being cannot be dependent on someone approving of you or liking you, or you've given them power over you. And that's what I said, you got to pull back your power. I hope that helps. It's kind of quick, but I feel like I'm the fire hose giving you guys stuff. So I'm going to answer one more question, and then I've got to move on to a phone call. I'm being interviewed for an article for Abuse on Magazine, so I've got to do that. All right. Every time my husband enters the door, my stomach shrinks. I feel very uneasy and tense. I cannot watch TV because he will come and look at me with hate and will slam the door. The next day he wants to read the Bible, watch sermons, and act very charming. It's like having a lot of different personalities. You never know which one you will get in the next 5 minutes. Working on leaving the marriage, but I will be here still for a while. I get long texts of complaints of how awful I am when I say no to interact with him as he is showing this behavior. But he says, which bad behavior? I think if you're planning to leave and you're not hoping for reconciliation or whatever, I think the more that you can just go gray rock, which is a phrase like jade we talk about. If you Google gray rock, you'll get some information on it. But it's sort of like talking to a gray rock. You don't get any emotional response. So I think you can respond back with the facts of whatever it is. But he feeds off of your upsetness, right? And so as long as you can stay very detached like a gray rock. Like when you yell at a gray rock, what does a gray rock do? Nothing. They don't respond. If you, tell a gray rock that they're ugly, they don't argue with you. They don't respond. They just gray rock you. And so the more that you can just kind of picture yourself in that place for right now, I think the better off you'll be. You're not gonna, here's where we get in this crazy dance. We think if only we explain it right, if only we say it right, then he'll hear. So practice. Give him a teaspoon and see. Can he hear just a teaspoon? If he can hear a teaspoon, then maybe you can have hope that he can have another teaspoon. But if you're trying and he's not hearing and he accuses and attacks and reverse everything on you, you can slow the conversation down, give him a teaspoon and see what happens. But if he still spits it out at you, understand, you cannot have any influence on this man, right? You just can't. He won't let you. And stop it. Just stop it, because you're casting your pearl before swine. And Jesus himself says, stop it, because they will trample your pearls and turn around and attack you, which is what you're talking about here. All right. Last question. If we are just an object and they don't think literally about you, then I am stupid. Do I just give up? Am I wrong for staying? God doesn't like divorce. I keep praying for a miracle to ask God to help me change and be a better person. So the truth is that you are an object. If your husband is a narcissist, you are an object, but you might be a beloved object, okay? So if you're a Corvette to a narcissist, they love having their Corvette. They love taking care of it. They love showing it off. They just don't want the Corvette to complain about anything, right? So you can be a worthy object if you understand your place. But narcissists don't have, you're a Corvette so that the narcissist looks like a hottie while he's driving the Corvette, right? It's not about, oh, look at my Corvette, other than look at the Corvette. I'm rich enough to own a Corvette, right? And so I don't know what kind of narcissist you are married to. There are some men or women who are narcissistic who can treat you well and show care for you, polishing the Corvette and, sitting in the Corvette and being with the Corvette and taking care of the Corvette as long as the Corvette works fine for them. If the Corvette starts falling apart or starts saying, I want more than just what a Corvette gets, then you'll have some conflict. So sometimes women have chosen to stay well with a narcissist who can treat them well as long as they don't have any needs of their own and they get their own needs met elsewhere. And so they can stay in a relatively safe way in a home they love, with a community they love and grandchildren they love, all the perks of family life, without having the kind of marriage they thought they were going to have. All right. So I think some of it depends on how you're treated as an object, because there are worthy objects and there are objects that, like I talked about before, I take care of my glasses. These are an object. I take care of them. I clean them every day. But they're starting to fall apart. They're just little readers that I picked up in Germany when I was there for $15, and I noticed that they're starting to get like the stuff is starting to peel off here and all that. So sooner or later, I'm going to discard them. Right? Because I'll need another pair, and that happens when the object stops being useful to you as a narcissist. You discard and find another one, and that's often what happens. So I'm going to go now, ladies. It's been my joy to be with you. I hope you sign up for the workshop that we're having next Tuesday. It's www.leslievernick.com/join webinar. You will get a detailed handout before the webinar. I encourage you to come live because we will not be on Facebook. We will be on a private webinar site that you can ask your questions, and I'll stay as long as we need to answer all of your questions so that we can really dig deep on some things and really do some additional teaching. And you can be in a community with other women who can chat with you on that line as well. So it'll be next Tuesday at noon Eastern time or 7:30. And we are going to do another Facebook Live. I'm not sure. I checked my calendar and now when you get old, you just can't remember stuff like I used to in terms of times. But I think it's Thursday or Friday, but I'm not positive. Might be Wednesday. I don't know. Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday, sometime around there. You'll get a notice that we're doing another Facebook Live. Have these been helpful? So I will talk to you soon and take care. God bless. Bye-bye.